Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Layer by Layer, the show about 3D printing and our place at Slant 3D inside of the industry. Today we're going to be talking about Velo3D, Shapeways auctioning off equipment, and Fictive talking to ChatGPT, and then later on we'll talk a little bit about selling STLs. But let's go ahead and dive straight into the news to get started with the Velo3D sale. The Velo3D, metal 3D printing company. Let's see here. As one of the few additive manufacturing companies to be publicly listed, it bumps in the road are emphasized by the transparency that being on the stock exchange demands. We can see when a tough quarter knocks them off track of their revenue targets. We can see when they have been forced to reduce headcount as part of a 40% reduction in operating expenses. Velo3D has started entertaining different options that may include, but are not limited to, a strategic transaction, potential merger, business combination, or sale. When asked about it, CEO Brad Krieger told TCT, "There's not a whole lot I can comment on the details of the particular process. I think we've mentioned we would be exploring partnerships, mergers, sales, etc." So Velo3D has been going through a lot of a shakeup the last little while. They've been trying to get themselves cleaned up. They've been in a little bit of a rough patch. Sale has to be on the table. They have to. They have no direction to go. They went into non-compliance with the New York Stock Exchange, which basically means that they became a penny stock when they're supposed to be above $1 because they've lost so much value. So they're going to have to do a reverse stock merge to stay on the stock exchange. And Benny Buller stepped down as his role of CEO, and Velo3D is just kind of in a lot of trouble right at the moment, frankly. And all of this is kind of a public announcement to tell any suitors, hey, we're kind of available if you guys are looking for anything. So, it's a thing. It's a continuation of the story. A lot of 3D printing companies are kind of in this situation where there's just a huge amount of merging and selling going on because all of the venture money has dried up and debt has become expensive and so on and so forth. Businesses have to operationally maintain themselves. Kind of funny in a certain context that business now has to be functional in order to continue to exist. But yes, a lot of this stuff. Velo3D, no idea who would be interested in them. Generally, if it was 2 years ago, Desktop Metal would have bought them like immediately, but it's not 2 years ago, and Desktop Metal's in a similar situation where they're trying to get bought or merged with somebody. So I don't imagine there's too many acquisition suitors out there for what Velo3D did, because they're still also just expensive. All right, Fictive. Fictive introduces a ChatGPT bot. Per TCT, Fictive has introduced an artificial intelligence assistant designed to help engineers quickly navigate material options for their manufacturing needs. Powered by OpenAI's ChatGPT, Materials.ai is integrated into Fictive's digital manufacturing platform and has been extensively trained on Fictive's manufacturing data and offerings. This allows Materials.ai to be consulted by engineers receiving material suggestions before placing their manufacturing orders. So effectively what this means is that you can describe what you're trying to make to this GPT, this is definitely a GPT, just a GPT where Fictive uploaded all their stuff, they made the GPT, and then they integrated that GPT into their own website, because that's what you can do, but it's a GPT on the GPT store, guaranteed. Or running on OpenAI's API. Either way, you can train, it's OpenAI with information and content from that. It's like if we took our YouTube channel and put it into a ChatGPT, or into a GPT, and then let you all access it. Wouldn't that be a crazy idea? But that's what they're doing. Different topics. So the future roadmap stuff, didn't say nothing to nobody, no how. But so Fictive, this is a really useful thing because it gives very scalable engineering advice of like, okay, you don't know anything about 3D printing materials. Tell this bot what you want, and the bot has enough context to make you recommendations. But it's also indicative of the problem with 3D printing companies, in that engineers don't know what to go order. It's like, oh, you got nylon this and nylon that and glass filled and so on and so forth. You can print all this stuff. What should I pick? I'm trying to make a box. So having a chatbot there that effectively is the person on the phone telling you what you should be doing based on the knowledge of the platform, is a good idea. And you will see this much more often. This is, again, kind of a news for the 3D printing industry, but it's not news for the industry as a whole. This application is very well understood and applied by many other companies. But anyhow, 3D printing service provider Shapeways is set to auction off $5 million of hardware from industrial 3D printer manufacturer Desktop Metal. This hardware includes Desktop Metal P1 production system, 3D printers, shop sister, binder jet 3D printers, BMD 3D printers, powder stations, powder blenders, sinterings furnaces, and drying ovens. Okay. This is interesting in a number of different directions. Not terribly surprising in the context of Shapeways, which right now publicly traded is worth about $13 million for the company as a whole. And they're going to be cash strapped and everything else. And of companies that are in trouble, Shapeways have gone from a valuation of about, I think, $200 million at their peak, or $150 to $200 million, down to $13 million. And they have been working for the last year to try to get themselves cleaned up. They've moved facilities. They've reduced headcount. They've shrunk themselves. They've already been in trouble with the stock exchange for being a penny stock. They did a reverse merge of that, but they're still burning tons of cash, losing tons of cash, and their revenue is not increasing very quickly. So again, they have to do this. Selling equipment, totally reasonable, totally fine. However, they only upscaled all of the Desktop Metal equipment, I think, less than 2 years ago. It was a big deal when they added it in as a new feature. And very clearly it is not paying for itself, otherwise it wouldn't be the first thing on the chopping block. It's possible that maybe they have just more of this stuff. Maybe they have another production system and another shop system and all this other stuff. But it looks like they're just cleaning out the Desktop Metal portfolio from their systems to focus on other stuff. And to be fair, Shapeways focuses on a lot of different stuff. They tried, in the last couple of years or so, they've tried to turn into like geometry or proto labs rather than focusing on 3D printing, so because those are more profitable. But it's going to be interesting to see how they all shake out. But the fact that they're losing the Desktop Metal stuff shows there's clearly not super high demand for the Desktop Metal stuff, which also then applies to Desktop Metal itself, not selling enough of their own machinery to companies or companies using their machinery. Because the production system is supposedly a high throughput system, but if you're using it in Shapeways model, which is print on demand, I don't think it works very well. Again, not investment advice. This all opinions are my own and so on and so forth. But here's the thing. The problem with 3D printing at production is that it's not push a button and go. That almost doesn't work anywhere, especially for metal sintering processes. You have to build a process and a baking procedure and everything else around it. And the needs for specifically 3D printed products from an engineering standpoint are not very common when machining is an option, and very few people know how to design for 3D printing in order to create specific types of products that require that process. So there's not much. That's all a long way of saying there's not much demand for it because people don't know what to do with it. And Desktop Metal has fallen into this, that even though they may have hit scale with the P1 system, even though there's rumors around that about its effectiveness and how people are using it, it's a large-scale system like that is intended to be, does not fit with Shapeways model, which is inherently a prototyping system. Shapeways has always been a prototyper, currently is branded as a prototyper, looks like a prototyper. They're not a production or injection molding system, even though they've tried to kind of move that direction in the last couple of years or so. But they're obviously not moving a lot of metal stuff, and any metal stuff at all, because if they're getting rid of the shop system, which is a very upper low volume kind of item, the binder jet machine is certainly low volume. Everything else, they're just clearing out Desktop Metal. It's not a quantity thing at all. It's unused or not profitable. And I don't know what Desktop Metal, well, they're auctioning it off, so they bought it all. Desktop Metal isn't doing the subscription model, industrial rental kind of thing. But anyhow, I didn't realize this, quite frankly. I thought Shapeways started up in like 2012, but it was spun out of Philips in 2007, which I did not realize. I didn't know Shapeways was a division of Philips way back when. That's really fascinating to me. I knew that they were from over there. I knew that they were a Dutch company, but it's just interesting. But yes, currently valued at $13 million. Shapeways is in a tough spot, and they're just liquidating. Literally last week, we talked about how many 3D printing companies are kind of undervalued because they have assets greater than their current valuation. Shapeways is one of those. They have stuff on their balance sheet that is worth more than the company is currently worth. The company's worth less because they're losing so much money, so people think they're just going to run into the ground. This is kind of an indication of that. They're liquidating now their assets to pay their cash flow bills, which is a thing you have to do for the survival of the company, but it also means you're fighting for survival of the company. Man, this is kind of bleak this week. That was not the intention when we were pulling together these show notes. But anyhow, there's all that stuff. So that's news. Cool. Okay. Now, moving on to Tangled testing. So, Tangled testing, new YouTube channel, just opened up. We started it last. It got its intro video, trailer video, released this week, and one video should be up by now by the time this podcast goes out. Interesting story with this. We had planned 2 videos to be released for Tangled testing. One that would kind of announce Tangled testing being available over there, and the other one to be sitting over there. Two testing videos. What happened is that both of those videos were flummoxed by the very point of Tangled testing. So we talk about this in the video that I already came out, but literally the material that we were using for testing was so inconsistent that we couldn't get the test results reliable. So it just threw out of whack our whole production schedule because we're like, okay, we're going to do this test and then we're going to film it, and those are going to be our 2 videos and so on and so forth. And it's going to be good information, good data, good videos. But they weren't. The video was unusable because the data was garbage, because it looks like the material was garbage. The PLA was effectively changing between one print to another, so that they didn't have consistent material properties. So when we changed infill and wall thickness for the 2 separate testing videos, we got wildly out of whack results that didn't follow physics the way it should. But literally, even though that messed up our production schedule, it reinforced the need for Tangled testing, because now we're able to point to this particular manufacturer, which we haven't revealed yet because we're going to cover all that in another video again. But it showed, oh, wow, yeah, we as the testers can't even get good data out of this because the filament is so wildly unverified that you don't know what it's going to be. You bought a spool from this one manufacturer, and that spool is unreliable throughout its length. So just enforced the need to do more testing, and also helped us kind of re-inform how we're going to go about testing, because we've been going at this MVP way, the way we always go at stuff, which is like minimum viable product. Figure out how we're going to do it and test and iterate and get better over time. But this immediately, right off the bat, we have to run into this and reevaluate our testing procedures. Most of the Tangled testing videos very often are single tests. So, okay, how does infill affect stuff? Well, we run a test of each one of them and go all the way through. We don't do like sample batches of like 10 tests of that infill, so on, to normalize the data or to average out the data. But very clearly that's necessary in this case because we had wildly erratic data that we didn't anticipate. So Tangled testing is launched. There's a couple videos over there now. Do go over and subscribe. We would really appreciate it. We have some great videos lined up there. We planned out much of the content calendar for it, or the content list for it, a week or so ago. So many of those videos are in production currently, and will start dripping out over there. So do subscribe to go see those Tangled testing videos. Those testing videos are going to move almost entirely over to the Tangled testing channel. And Slant 3D will focus more on design and mass production, the way we always have. But those testing videos need their own spot. Tangled needs its own spot. So it's all going over there. That channel will also be a lot of fun because within the context of testing, we can test things that generally would not appear on the Slant 3D channel. So over here, we talk about, I would say, higher level professional manufacturing and that kind of stuff, not really hobbyist things. But with Tangled testing, we can test the cheapest filaments on Amazon, how different colors interact, how good the saturation of colors is, how different manufacturers behave, different tools and equipment that's useful in 3D printing. It opens up a different catalog of stuff and different types of videos that we're able to make and still leverage a lot of our knowledge that we have here at Slant 3D, but historically hasn't really been allowed on this channel because this channel is about mass production using 3D printing. But Tangled testing is going to be a lot of fun. And yeah, first video. It's like, we have to do this now. It's like the filament itself very clearly is jacking with us. So now we have to test it more. The need for the testing becomes clearer. So that is up and live. Please go over and subscribe. Really, truly. Like, it'd be a big deal and it'd be great to us. Filament. Quick update on Filament. The main machine, the Tangled extrusion machine, is still down. All the stuff is in transit or being made. We have 2 different suppliers making spare parts for it. There was another part that got burned up with the first one. They're twins. They were twin collars, and we had tested the first one because we thought it was the one that was out. And then on further testing, we found that the other one was also burnt out. So we've got replacements for all of those coming, because we were ordering the pairs of them anyway right at the beginning. So it didn't really delay us on the discovery that the other one was there. It's just our jerry-rigged fix wasn't viable right off the bat because we didn't have enough jerry-rigged parts to fix both of the heating collars on the extruder. So that is the update there. Again, and I want to reinforce this, if you want a refund for your filament, absolutely reach out to us and we will get you the refund for that filament until we're up and running again. This was not meant to be a pre-ordering campaign, which is what it has turned into. So just, reach out to us over at tangled.com or tangledfilament.com and we'll make sure we get you taken care of there. Because again, I've reinforced this before, the point of Tangled is to be a low cost but reliable source of filament. And we're having plenty of bumps in this, but if we're messing with you in some kind of a way, make sure we get you made right with you because we don't want to have to jack with anybody. That's our responsibility. And if the machinery breaks down, that's on us to eat it and deal with it. And we are. So if it's causing problems for you, please reach out to us and let us make it right for you. We'll get you a refund for that right away. But the joys of that stuff. This is why we don't introduce new product lines if we don't have to. But Tangled is still necessary. Tangled is in a really good spot, though, because once we get over this snafu, we should be able to do another price reduction here in the next couple of months. Once we get up and rolling and in a consistent, continuous scale, that'd be great. If anybody who watches this is local in Boise, Idaho, and wants to run an extrusion line, we need more people on the extrusion lines. So we have jobs available there, especially if somebody wants to work night shift. We're trying to get a night shift put together for filament extrusion itself, so that we can increase the production rates. But that's all filament. Okay, so now the topic of the day, selling 3D files. Okay, so selling files. We had our first real exposure to this. Slant, last week we did a video on Stanley tumblers, designing a tumbler for mass production 3D printing. I don't have mine up here. I should have brought it with me. First of all, that project was a lot of fun and was an excellent video for demonstrating why printing was so valuable, because when the video, went viral for us, it got 120,000 views at the moment. But we ended up having the original design that was shown in the video. After we had completed that design and we filmed the whole video, we realized that there were some things we wanted to fix with it. So between the video being filmed and the video airing, we changed the design and uploaded the new model because it was more robust. And then when the video went live, you had the one with the handle and one with the closed handle. By the way, people with the closed handle, it's ambidextrous. It's not, it itself is not right and left-handed. There's just it's not a mirror image style. So left-handed people hold it a little bit differently, but still comfortably. It's a perfectly ambidextrous handle. We're not discriminating towards right-handed or left-handed at all. It looks like one side or the other handle, but it's not. Both left-handed and right-handed can use it. It doesn't hurt nothing. But anyway, when we closed off the handle, it made it more robust, made a better handle, used our handle video information, which for some reason we didn't apply on the first design of it. But we had iterated on the design between when it was created and when it was launched based on user feedback, which is the magic of 3D printing. And then actually we released another new version a few days later. Again, all previous versions work fine, but based on feedback, we added some tweaks and turns and that kind of stuff to just refine it a little bit more, because you can do that with printing. Anyway, we sold the STLs for that model. With those STLs, we didn't actually have a particular license attached to it. And here is why. As soon as somebody downloads your STL, you have lost full control of your files. It's gone. It's on the wind. It's on the internet. It's out there. Somebody can sell it on Etsy and so on and so forth. It can be pirated, and you have no recourse. This has been a problem for forever. I honestly don't know. Well, I do know how they get away with this. But 3D model designers, like on Patreon and that kind of stuff, the model is unsustainable because it's kind of like content in that it burns out after a week. So like any Patreon designer, like Mint, let's look at Mint because he does an amazing job and is very good at his job and has built a business around doing this. But his business and his Patreon page, or well, no, not Patreon. I think he's on Thangs now. But that membership. He makes subscription memberships from the people who subscribe to his content on Thangs. But the only reason people subscribe is because there's another new model coming. And Fotis is not able to, or any designer is not able to rely on past models, because as soon as those models are exposed and people can download the STL, it's gone and in the wind. Everybody has it or shares it across or whatever it happens to be. There's no recurring revenue once the file is exchanged because you just get diluted by the piracy, quite frankly. And it's not rampant. To be fair, I'm amazed how many designers have as sustainable of a subscription base as they are. It's a great testament to how good the 3D printing community is that they can reliably give away the STLs and they're not immediately everywhere all over the place. They're almost always findable, but they're not immediately everywhere. Because the repositories, I think, do a little bit of tracking of it, and there's some good community watchdogs because everybody in the 3D printing space is always right on top of you, like they don't have the license image or something on the Etsy page, that kind of thing. Like everybody's pretty good at that for watching for that kind of stuff. So the community is very strong, but again, it's not scalable, and technically, even if that occurs, the amount of enforcement required to protect a 3D model after it's been emailed to a group of people or given in a Google Drive or an STL shared with anybody else there's no control. It's gone. And a Creative Commons license, quite frankly, is a toothless thing. We did not publish with the Creative Commons because it's a toothless thing. I didn't want to do the paperwork. I didn't even want to have to upload the logo to the listing. Did not care. However, in the interest of protecting our design a little bit, there was a logo on the mugs, the Slant logo. Not the text, because I don't like text. Text is gross on the design of a product. But it is a logo, and it's on a curved surface. So it's very difficult to remove that logo if you plan to pirate our models. And you're going to be like, oh, Gabe, you don't have the licensing on it. You don't have to do it. I'm like, there's not a Creative Commons license on a YouTube video either, but you're not allowed to rip it and go post it on Facebook. That's infringement. The same thing applies to the art and the content of 3D models. Anyway, different topic around intellectual property. Anyway, So we had the logo on there, which was a functional way of kind of creating friction for piracy. But as we talked about this, and when we were doing these models, and with selling 3D models, the challenges of selling 3D models are many and varied, and there need to be a few solutions out there for it. Right at the moment, the value of 3D models is wildly varied. Nobody knows what a 3D model is worth. So we sold ours for $299, and effectively we considered that the same as like an app or a song on the iTunes store or something like that. We think that pricing, we're going to experiment with that. Angled.io, which historically has always been our designer featured website, we're restructuring into the same thing, but it will still feature designer products, and many of them will be ours, but many of the other ones on there right now are other people's that we've licensed to show the print-on-demand capability of 3D printing. That's what Angled is. It's a technology demonstration. But we're also including the sale of the models themselves, which creates a whole new set of problems, and it's a whole new different type of business model. But it's something we want to experiment with because, number one, we're generating a lot of 3D models that are, quite frankly, pretty darn good and pretty darn interesting through the creation of the content of this channel. So we want to make them available, but we want to do it in a smart way. So over there we have, we're starting to release some of our support aids and design aids, so like ribs and combs and thumbtacks and that kind of thing. Those will all get released over there so that you can add them into your existing models to create designed support and that kind of stuff. So those are all there. The other thing, but still, the problem of selling models is that there's no way to police it. And it's the exact same situation that the music industry found itself in back in 2001 when the iPod came out. There was rampant piracy of music files because people could rip them off a CD, upload them to BitTorrent or whatever it was back then, Napster, and the music industry had no proceeds of it. And I'm not suggesting that the 3D printing designers turn into the music industry, but there is some importance and some relevance to that because you can't just have your creations floating around on the internet because you have to make a living. In order to have good stuff made, people have to be able to make a living from it. The 3D printing industry has been very altruistic about 3D models from the very beginning, but the problem with that is it's been unsustainable for designers. When they were giving designs away for free on Thingiverse, someone would do it for a few months or a few weeks, but then since there was no way to make a living at it, they would burn out after a while, and there was no incentive to continue to creating and sharing more stuff. Patreon came along and helped that a little bit, and now the repos are finally catching up with that of allowing designers to monetize, like printables and things. But still, it's still ultimately still you're emailing a file to a person, and then that file can end up anywhere, and there's not a good way of monitoring it. Although, side note, we with Fangs, they might actually be able to police it in a way that other people haven't, and I'm going to save that for a different part of the conversation because we have a few interesting insights and access to this conversation that will come out on this podcast show in a little while. So make sure you're subscribed if you're not, because that's going to be a fun conversation. Anyhow, but yes, the sale of 3D models is still wildly broken. And while it has become more monetizable than it has in the past, and there's been actual tools now created for designers to share their files and monetize them, the protection of those files is still terrible. I also think the monetization is lower than it could be, because if the 3D model, the point of the 3D model is to be 3D printed, then the value isn't really in the model, it's in the product that's being printed. And as more and more of the prints are created, and more printers become useful, there's an opportunity here for designers to not leverage just the sale of the file, which they lose control of, but maybe get access to like a royalty of the toy. So like if Fotis makes a dragon head and people print it on Etsy, there should be some way that Fotis gets like a royalty of each one of the sales of those products. There's some way of getting this done to where there's more control and protection of the files without just turning them loose to everybody. So that's something that the discussion should be had and people should be thinking about, because right now it's just, you throw them out there into the internet and they're gone. But the designs of these things, like even our Stanley Cup, even though it's a fairly simple design, there are some subtleties and there's a lot of expertise and a decent amount of work and effort that went into creating it to where, it wasn't free to make. And it's something that we would like to protect, but we have accepted that it's pretty much gone now. Like you get the first burst, but then after that, it's going to be shared around, and that's okay. That's okay. We expected that, and it's kind of our lightning rod and gift to humanity, and we'll do that. We'll share many of our files for free, but it's not sustainable, and it's not something that a full-time designer who's not running some other business like we kind of do should be expected to do, because they have to be able to make a living in order to continue making good stuff. Otherwise, we're just going to starve all the creative people who are making good models, and there won't be people making good models to show how awesome printing can be if people are using the process correctly. So yeah, there needs to be some other type of royalty thing. NFTs could have solved it, quite frankly. The blockchain and all the rest of it, having attribution of the file all the way back so you know the source of the file. And this is the problem that the repos have. If they don't currently have the file in stock or in their system, then they don't know if it's the original designer who's uploading it or a copycat or pirate who's uploading it first. So that's a challenge too. And this is like the fight that like Bamboo Lab and the rest. Well, no, Bamboo Lab had a different situation, but yeah, the attribution of files is really, really difficult. The protection of files is really, really difficult. NFTs solve the attribution issue. They don't solve the protection problem. The music industry has tried like having, you buy the song, but then it self-deletes after a week or something like that. So you like rent the song and the file can't get loose on the internet. But that didn't work. And there's no way the 3D printing community would appreciate that either. It's like, you printed it once, you're done. That's all the usage you get of that file. Now it's corrupted. That's not going to be viable. Somebody's probably going to try it, but it's not going to work because, again, we can see from history that it hasn't worked with digital media before. The music thing was solved by iTunes just making it so easy to purchase the file that no one was interested in pirating it. And that there's a little bit of that philosophy in what we're doing with Tangled right now. We want to make sure that the files are so affordable that it is cheaper and makes more, it's so affordable and so easy to get a hold of that it is cheaper and makes more sense to just download the file and pay 99 cents or $5.99 or whatever it happens to be. We don't know what it is. And get the file and know that it's good quality and where it came from and all the rest of it. And then you don't need to worry about it anymore. But there's still the issue of the pirate being able to download it and then upload it to things and Thingiverse and that kind of thing and effectively eating some of your sales, which is not, it's not breaking anybody, I don't think, but it's certainly not good and it's not healthy and it's not sustainable. So those are all the things with selling files. Selling files is in a really weird spot right now where it's just starting to kind of be formalized and thought about because there is this industry of 3D model creators like Fotis and all the Patreons, a lot of the 3D printing Patreon pages, other YouTubers and influencers, 3D Printer Academy. There's a few guys on Instagram, that kind of thing. There's just a lot of folks around. So there's room for improvement. Don't know what the solution is, but it's an issue that people should be discussing and looking at and playing around with solutions. And there'll be plenty of failures in all of those solutions, but it's something that people should be looking at because the protection of 3D models, for us as a print farm, we believe that people will start just designing products that other people sell or that are then sold to somebody and printed on demand, which means the value is not necessarily in the printing, the value is in the actual model. Oh, you designed a widget that a girl in New York wants. Well, if that model is not protected when we print and sell it to them, then you don't get anything from it. Then what was the point of making the model? What was the point of making a really good product for somebody? So that's the ramble. I don't have a clear solution for it. It's discussions we have in the office all the time, and it's a discussion we're going to have more now after we did this test with Tangled of selling that Stanley Cup model because we were exposed to all of the issues with it. Oh, also, for anybody interested in selling files, here's the thing. Here's the reason we had never sold files before, and we're going to be very restrictive in how we do it again in the future. With the Stanley Cup model, the cup was modeled around a very particular tumbler that was on Amazon. That tumbler sold out on Amazon, but we noticed it seemed like Amazon was porting people to a different listing, or the seller changed what was being sent in the listing to where there requires a rescaling of the part to fit with the tumbler that they're giving to you. The other issue is that when designing 3D models that are reasonably high tolerance, the Stanley Cup wasn't super high tolerance, but it was reasonably high tolerance. The cup has to slide in there snugly, otherwise it's a bad experience. You don't want the interior liner rattling around inside of whatever you print it out of. But the issue is that you design the model, and we design the model for our machines, but then anybody else with any other machine or using some other material with different shrink properties and that kind of thing could ended up in a hard spot because they have a different machine. So the fit is a little bit different. So they end up having to print it like twice because they got to rescale stuff, which is the problem with 3D model files again also, because a designer can design something and it works great, but then they either have to create tons of different variations that they can't possibly test for because they don't have every 3D printer in their garage where they're designing this thing. Or it creates a bad experience for the users of the file who have to print it twice. It's like, okay, how's it going to turn out on my machine? Okay, now I got to make adjustments and it turns out on my machine. And this is the argument for the very closed ecosystems like Bamboo Labs, like Prusa, to where you just download the G code and it says what material to print it in, and that prints out reliably, as opposed to downloading the STL, slicing it, and then printing it, because there's so much variation between slicers, between materials, between machines, between the wear of your nozzle, that selling the file is kind of a catch-22, because we sell the file, and if it doesn't print out and work perfectly, the blame is on us, even if your printer's out of tune. It's not always out of tune. Sometimes the blame is on us. But again, very often it's not. It's just the fact that you have a different printer, or the customer has a different printer that doesn't fit well. But the designer takes the brunt of that because it's like, oh, it doesn't print on my machine. And it's like, we get that. We do understand that, and we understand the frustration. But that is also part of the 3D printing hobby. The files are not universal. And the printers do not behave in identical fashions. The materials don't behave in identical fashions. And it is almost an impossible task for a designer to create a universal 3D model that can be printed on any machine, unless it's a single monolithic block to where that doesn't interface with anything, that doesn't have any tolerances, to where, yeah, you can print this character and you can't really tell that it's a quarter of a millimeter off in one direction or another because you had different shrink properties or a different machine or a belt was loose or whatever it was. So this was educational to us again in releasing this model. We wanted to release the Stanley Cup because it was a really cool model and a really cool product. But in future releases, we're going to be more restrictive of what we actually release to make sure that they're models that are reliable for you and that can't potentially flummox you or require double printing and adjustment and calibration for your particular machine. So that's a point of learning for us that we're going to get done going forward. So that's it, guys. Appreciate you all for watching. That's the show. We'll be back next week. And like I say, do subscribe down below. We have some really cool content coming down on this channel. And of course, now we have the second channel. Tangled testing is up and active, and we'll start getting some useful stuff over there very, very soon. But I do encourage you to go watch the videos over there about the challenges that we've already run into and why it's so important to build the Tangled testing channel. Have a great day, everybody.